Episode 282. Jimmy Dore.
Jimmy Dore, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you very much for being back on the show again. I've actually been keeping count, and this is your 7th appearance on the show, which puts you ahead of Matt Taibbi. So you are now the most frequent guest in the show's history.
That's what I'm going for. I'm trying to beat Taibbi.
Well, thank you so much for being back on today. I have a lot of different stuff that I wanted to speak with you about. But the first is censorship, because obviously this has been a big issue for years now, even before COVID, with Russiagate and all these channels getting demonetized and people getting deplatformed. And then obviously during COVID, there was actually a segment that we did where you were on my show, and that got removed off of YouTube because it was COVID misinformation. There was other stuff about the 2020 election that was censored off of YouTube for several years. So
I'm sure whatever we said about COVID was actually accurate, because they don't censor the lies about COVID. They censor the truth.
Right. But I'm just curious overall, we've had the advent of Rumble. Obviously, I know you have a lot of followers on Rumble now, and it's a very prominent platform. Elon Musk purchased Twitter and rebranded it as X, and nominally that was for free speech reasons. There's some folks who are back on there who were kicked off, and we had the revelation of the Twitter files and everything. So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are overall on the state of censorship. Are things getting any better now, or is it just sort of like a limited hangout and we're not actually improving that much?
Well, I think it's getting worse. It's going to keep getting worse, especially if Kamala wins. Kamala, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry. In 1 week, they all came out and said how we have to get rid of free speech. Tim Walz also, right? Tim Walz said that free speech doesn't apply to misinformation, and it doesn't apply to our democracy. I don't know what he meant by that.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
But I think he meant by, hey, we need to be able to censor you if you're telling truths that are uncomfortable for the establishment. Because let's remember, Julian Assange wasn't in prison because he lied about the war machine. He was in prison because he told the truth about the war machine. Same thing with Edward Snowden. Isn't a refugee in Russia because he lied about the security states, because he told the truth about it. Tucker Carlson didn't get fired from Fox News because he lied about the Ukraine war. It's because he told the truth about the Ukraine war. So same thing. I didn't get censored on YouTube because I lied about COVID. It's because I was telling the truth about COVID. And I caught on early on that the vaccine didn't stop transmission and contraction, and they didn't want people saying that. And I found out early on. I knew because I had Dr. Robert Malone on my show in summer of 2021. So, and all I did was anyway. I don't want to get too in the weeds over COVID, but there's definitely been a bigger push, and Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, they've pushed this false narrative that somehow free speech doesn't include misinformation. Well, again, that they're not afraid of the misinformation. It's the information. And I try to remind people that the biggest spreader of misinformation and disinformation is always the government. The government is always lying. We did this. Secretary Antony Blinken, there was calls for his resignation because he got caught lying to Congress about Israel when they were sabotaging humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. He lied and said they weren't, even though every one of his agencies underneath him said they were. And then he went to Congress and said they weren't. So we just caught Cringe Jean-Pierre lying yesterday about using FEMA aid for illegal immigrants. She said that that's categorically false, that Joe Biden didn't do that. And of course, there's a video of her from 2022 saying we're going to use FEMA relief funds for illegal immigrants, for migrants. So the biggest spreaders of lies, disinformation, and misinformation is always the government. Second, and a close second, is the corporate media, because they are owned by the same people. The government owns the same people who owns the government, owns the corporate media. And a far distant third of the people who are spreading misinformation are randos on social media. And so that's they're Hillary Clinton, she said the quiet part out loud. She said, we are going to, if we don't censor, I'm paraphrasing, but then she said, direct quote, she said, we're going to lose total control.
There should be a lot of things done. We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave, platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control.
That's a direct quote. We're going to lose total control. First of all, I didn't know you had total control. Second of all, who is we? Who is we? What does she mean when she says we're going to lose? Who is we're? And so that's what this is all about. It's about controlling you. It's about controlling how you think. It's about controlling who you talk to. And the eventual goal is to get you to stop thinking altogether.
Well, I wanted to speak a bit about the election today, and this is probably the craziest presidential election in U.S. history, just with the amount of odd things that have been happening over the last several months. And I'm sure it's great material for a comedian such as yourself. But we're actually coming up on the 1-year anniversary of a very interesting article that NBC put out, where they said that it was a conspiracy theory that people were suggesting Joe Biden would not be on the ballot in November.
Oh, I didn't know that was an article. That's amazing. I'll look that.
Yeah, they said it was a conspiracy theory. And then, we had this debate back in June, which was very odd timing because it was right after the primaries, but before either of the conventions. And almost immediately, as soon as that debate was over between Trump and Biden, it's like a memo went out where the entire media who had been defending him and saying that he was completely competent for years suddenly turned against him and pressured him out. Obviously, there was several weeks of Biden saying that he was not going to step down, and then finally just one day decided to. And Kamala Harris was anointed the Democratic nominee. And Trump has been outspoken about this. He's called it a coup. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this overall. Do you think that, this was really a plot? Because in my mind, and maybe I'm just a conspiracy theorist, but just the timing of everything. And again, having this debate in June, which is just, they don't normally do that at that time of the year, right after the primaries were wrapped up, but before the convention. That itself is very suspicious. And again, just the way that the media instantly turned on a dime against him. Am I being a little too conspiratorial there?
Not, no, sir, you're not. It's exactly correct observation, is that they always wait until after the convention to have the debate. So they had it a couple of months before, and the reason why was to expose Joe Biden because it was clear he was losing. It was clear people didn't want to vote for him. He was clear that he was demented, and it was clear he was demented the first time he ran, and it's only accelerated. And I mean, it's undeniable now. The guy can't even read a speech. So that's exactly why I think he got sabotaged by his own staff. They had him do the early debate. They knew what would happen, and they wanted it enough time. And they also knew that Kamala Harris couldn't get a vote. They also knew that she was, just like Hillary Clinton, was very repulsive to the majority of the electorate. She was the most unpopular vice president, I think, and certainly in modern times. That was the headline. Even Jimmy Kimmel, the tool like him, would say that on his own show. So everybody knew but she's the darling of Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. The same reason why Joe Biden was the pick. After Kamala Harris, in 2020, she was anointed on Martha's Vineyard by the donor class. And she then went out and couldn't. They were hoping she was going to be their Black Obama because they love to have a person of color, especially a woman person of color, as the face of imperialism, because then it's much easier to do it. It's harder to do it with someone like Donald Trump because they've already branded him a racist and a liar and all those things. So he's a bad face of American imperialism, whereas Barack Obama or Kamala Harris is a great face for it, right? It's easy to hide behind. So they anointed her, the donor class did, on Martha's Vineyard. She couldn't get a vote. So what did they do? They went to their next, second most reliable dupe, which has been Joe Biden, who served the interests of Wall Street and the military-industrial complex his entire career. So that's why they went from Kamala to him. And they got him over the finish line, and the plan was always, so then they forced Kamala on him as vice president. And then I think the plan was always to do exactly what they did. They didn't want Kamala to go through a primary. They wanted to stack the convention with the kind of delegates that were insiders, so they didn't allow a real primary, right? They didn't allow Bobby Kennedy on lots of ballots. They same thing with Marion Willis. So they made sure. They did things like, well, if you campaign in this state, all your delegates go to Joe Biden. We don't get, it's all those kind of crazy things they did. And they did that to rig the primary. So this is the third primary in a row that the Democratic Party has rigged. And of course, Bernie Sanders won't call it out. And so this was obviously always the plan. So the plan was to install her, which is exactly what they did. So she became the nominee without getting a single vote. They just made the donor class just made her the nominee. And because it was a convention full of insider Democrats who voted for Joe Biden, who supported Joe Biden. Joe Biden's the biggest neocon right-wing tool of the establishment that we've had as president in a long time. And so that's what the convention was filled with. I was at the convention, by the way. It was depressing beyond belief. In 2016, I was at the Democratic convention, which was the last convention they had. And it was encouraging because when you walked into the convention hall, it was filled, half the place was filled with Bernie Sanders delegates, meaning half the delegates wanted to overthrow the corporate control of the Democratic Party. And they wanted radical change. They wanted to end the wars. They wanted the money invested back in America. They wanted health care for everybody. They wanted free college. There's a lot of things. So there was a lot of friction at that convention. And none of that this time. None. It was like a Stepford Wives convention. It wasn't, and it was not, as Chris Hedges said, it was not a reality-based event. It was all these people pretending they're lefties, and they're cheering on billionaires like Oprah Winfrey and Pritzker. Oprah Winfrey goes up and so does talks about how she's been a victim of discrimination. Oprah Winfrey's been a super wealthy celebrity embraced by the establishment with her own television show my entire adult lifetime, since before I was in college. So for her to get up there and talk about herself as a discriminated against victim, as a billionaire, she's richer than any actor in the world. Also, they did the same thing with Michelle Obama. She talked about how they were always suspicious of people who took more than they needed. They have 3 of the biggest mansions I've ever seen, 2 of them at sea level. One's on 48 acres in Martha's Vineyard. Another one's in Maui, and they have one in Chicago. It's just, it was just not a reality-based event. It was all a bunch of billionaires trying to pantomime as fighting fighting for the little guy, and they were all fighting for more war. That's what they were talking about: more war, more corporate control, more division, dividing the country with the accusations of racism and sexism. That's all they have, because they don't have. There was no talk of economics. There was no talk of class issues or class fighting. It was none of that. It was all abortion, more war, and more corporate control, and they all cheered it on, and they cheered on installing Kamala Harris without one vote, not one vote in the primary. They just made her, the donor class just made her the nominee, and everybody was okay with it. It's the most undemocratic thing that's ever happened in this country in my lifetime, and it was fucking amazing.
Well, you mentioned RFK Jr. I know that you interviewed him last year,
Couple
and
times I interviewed. Everybody missed the first time I interviewed him. People only saw the second time. The first time, I gave him a hard time for running against. I can't get excited about your candidacy because you're running in the Democratic Party. Why do you think they have super delegates, Bobby? They're there so people like you can't become president. That's what this is all about. So they're never going to allow you to become the nominee. So this is a fool's errand. So I didn't get emotionally invested in it. I couldn't get interested or excited. And then it took him about, I don't know, 6 months for him to figure out what I already knew when he started running, that he was in there in my studio trying to tell me that the Democrats were better than Republicans. He was doing that. And so I was just kind of laughable, right? I mean, I like a lot of the things he was saying. I certainly appreciate his voice around vaccine safety and COVID, and now around getting our food supply and our water supply cleaned up. But everybody saw the second time he came on my show, it was already a fool's errand by then. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, I just wanted to ask you about him generally, and also Tulsi Gabbard, who I know that you had been involved with in the past. I remember an event that you did with her in New Hampshire in 2020 or 2019.
Yeah, I
And
supported her in 2020.
yeah, so again, these are two individuals who were Democrats in the past, who, were probably thought as progressive Democrats in the past, and now they're both supporting Trump and endorsing him and being part of his campaign effectively. But along with that, I think that there's been a bit of a shift where both of them have been very supportive of Israel, especially with this bombing of Gaza that's been taking place the last year. I don't know if that's related to sort of the party shift or if that's maybe things that they always kind of believed, or, both of them have connections to this Rabbi Shmuley. Actually, Rabbi Shmuley was attacking RFK a couple years ago when RFK was defending Roger Waters. And then immediately after that happened, RFK kind of threw Roger Waters under the bus and started palling around with Rabbi Shmuley. But again, it seems strange to me when you see RFK and Tulsi sort of talk about or tweet about what's happening in Israel and Gaza, because they don't sound very anti-war. They sound very pro-war. They're spouting all of these sort of Zionist talking points.
I don't believe that there's a genocide going on, and I don't think Israel's intention is genocide. I don't believe there's any evidence of genocide. There is genocide going on in the Mideast, but it's a genocide of Jews and it's a genocide of Christians, and nobody's complaining about it for some reason. And there are much worse wars than what's happening in Gaza right now. They protect it in the most challenging conditions. The Israeli government the IDF has protected civilians better than any army in history. John Spencer said it has done more to protect civilians under more difficult circumstances than any army in history.
I'm just kind of wondering what your evaluation of that is.
Yeah, it's the nicest way I could put it's the most unfortunate thing. It's almost crazy. I mean, I don't want to get inside their heads. All I can judge is their policy positions on that, and their policy positions are odious but they're the exact same policy positions as the Democrat and the Republican Party. So, in that regard, Tulsi and RFK are just being regular Democrats. So yeah, their policy is contradicts everything the reason why I was attracted to Tulsi Gabbard's campaign was because she got in trouble with the Democratic Party because she spoke out against the corporate control of their party, and she also told the truth about the Syrian war. And so, of course, as soon as you tell the truth about a war, they smear you. So I got slandered and smeared by everybody because I told the truth and debunked the pro-war narrative of the gas attacks in Syria. That was all a lie. That was to try to give cover for the United States to get involved in the Syrian war and start bombing Syria. So she did the same thing. She stood up against our interventionist wars, and she still does, except they all are toe the Democratic Party line when it comes to Israel. And, Israel is going to be, is the downfall of America. It's going to drag us into maybe a World War III. And, I'm anti-Zionist. And they will also conflate Zionism, and if I was just at an event called Rescue the Republic in Washington, D.C., and my message there to those people was that because I was interested in joining together with people who I disagree with on things like Israel, but we all agree on free speech. And so I had to make the point that if you're for free speech, that means you have to be for free speech of Palestinian protesters, because if they can shut them down, they can shut anybody down.
Right now, there's a wave of censorship happening in protests. That means we have to stand up for the right of protest for pro-Palestinian protesters, because if they can shut them down, they can shut us down. And the people who want to shut down the pro-Palestinian protesters say, well, those college protesters, they don't even know what they're protesting for. And it's a good thing they don't, because if they did, they'd be fucking right. I have my Zionist friends who try to get me to go along with Israel. They say to me, they go, Jimmy, I know you support the LGBTQ. You know who doesn't? Hamas. Hamas doesn't support gay people. What do you say to that, Jimmy? I say, I guess we should slaughter their children. Anyway, people say that Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. You know why? Because we overthrew all the other fucking democracies so we could steal their oil.
So the Palestinians' right to free speech, protesters' right to free speech, is my right to free speech. That's what we have to. So that's my message to those people, Israel is a cancer on the United States, and it's malignant, and it's growing, and it's spreading. But I think most of the people are against our policy, the United States government policy with Israel. I think people right now, you saw Kamala Harris got on Saturday, she got the most epic ratio on Twitter I've ever seen. She tweeted out that they're sending hundreds of millions and more dollars to humanitarian aid to the people of Lebanon. Well, isn't that funny? Because we're funding Israel's bombing of Lebanon, and we're also funding the humanitarian aid to Lebanon. At the same time, we're denying aid. There's myriad reports of FEMA not doing their job on the ground in the hurricane devastated areas, and those people can't get they promise those people $700, which you have to apply for, which people are getting denied all the time. So it was the most epic. So at least my point is, I guess Americans are waking up a little bit to how destructive our foreign policy is around Israel, and the idea that Israel's is. It's always been that they're led by a psychopathic warmongering maniac, Netanyahu, and they lead the United States around by the nose. I mean, AIPAC should have to be forced to register as a foreign agent, because they are, and it's propaganda when they say Russia has influence over our elections. Right. Russia can't even get their good vodka into Trader Joe's. Okay, the people who are the country that has undue influence on our elections is AIPAC, and how do I know? They brag about it. So yeah, it's a real disappointment. It's a heartbreak that Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy toed the Democratic Party line on Israel and Gaza and all those things, because that's very likely where World War III might break out. So yeah, it's a heartbreak, and but. Again, I'll join with anybody to do right and nobody to do wrong. So when Tulsi and Bobby say we have to normalize relationships with China and Russia, and we have to end the war in Ukraine and invest that money back here, and no more interventionist wars, and we have to clean up our food supply and our water supply, and I'll join with anybody to work on those things. And those are things that Democrats used to talk about, and they're not talking about. It was the most encouraging thing, Primo, about that when I saw Bobby Kennedy give a speech at a Trump rally in Arizona right after when he was announcing his support and MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. He was talking about ending the war in Ukraine, investing that money, not having any more interventionist wars. He was talking about taking on big agra. He was talking about cleaning up the corruption inside our captured regulatory agencies, and which is things that Democrats never talk about anymore. In fact, they say the opposite. And there was a room full of Republican voters that was cheering that on. And so that's what really scares the establishment. They don't want us to know that a room full of Republican voters agrees with us on 8 out of 10 things. That's what they don't want us ever coming together in agreement. That's what scares them. Just like when Christian Smalls, a black guy on Staten Island, organized a bunch of Trump voters in the first union against Amazon, and he did it as a black guy with white Trump voters. That's what scares them, right? When people realize we have a lot in common, meaning we have class issues in common, that we have economic issues in common, and we share a common enemy, and that common enemy isn't your neighbor, it's the oligarchy. So that's my long answer to that.
Hey Radicals, I hope that you're all enjoying this interview. As you know, this is the start of my spectacular 10th season. This is going to be a big one. We have lots of big returning guests, lots of new guests as well. So really want to make sure that it's great. Please do help support the show if at all possible. You can do that in a few different ways. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me across all different social media networks. And also, if at all possible, please do consider financially supporting the show. You can do that at patreon.com/Primo Radical. When you become a patron, you can submit questions to all of my guests, so please do consider that. That's only $1 a month. Please also consider sending super chats and super thanks, and make sure again that you're just following me across all different social media networks. Thanks again, folks, for the last 9 years of support, and again, I'm looking forward to making this a great 10th season. Well, one of the presidential candidates who I think is really benefiting from the fact that both Harris and Trump are seemingly in favor of this genocide, the candidate that seems to be benefiting from that politically in the U.S. is Jill Stein. She seems to be getting a decent amount of support. She's getting pretty good media coverage, too, I think, lately. She's been doing some big interviews. I know that you have been a little outspoken against her. I know you and I both, we've had kind of this weird relationship with the Green Party the last several years where, kind of want to be supportive in some ways, but
Yes.
it seems as though it's just kind of a clusterfuck inside of the Green Party. So anyway, I'm just kind of curious what your criticisms of Jill Stein are now, if you have any, or if you are supporting her, or what your thoughts are exactly.
Yeah, I think the Green Party is completely infiltrated by the intelligence community, and there's a concerted effort inside the party to not grow the party. I think they're controlled opposition, and
Could it just be that they're incompetent though, or do you think necessarily like?
Are you kidding me? Yeah, I think they are. It's intentional incompetence. You're telling me that Diane Sara could get on the ballot in New York, but the Green Party couldn't? The Green Party's been doing this since 1993. They couldn't get on the ballot, but Diane Sara can? Come on. And it's the same requirement. So this, and then they feign incompetent. Oh, I didn't know what's going on. So, the Green Party's, I was their most comfortable media outlet in 2016 and up until 2020. They wanted to come on my show. They reached out. Whenever they did, I brought Jill Stein on my show. And then
you also had Howie Hawkins on after, he completely shot himself in the foot.
Yeah. And I didn't want to punch down on Howie Hawkins. Right. So I think I went easy on him, because he was a mushmouth moron. And that's another reason why it's clear that they're a controlled party, right? That guy is a mushmouth moron. He speaks like Bull Connor, but he's from San Francisco. The guy, and he's one of the dumbest guys I've ever seen in politics is Howie Hawkins. I mean, he tell you the reason why he Russiagated was because he was hungry? He had a stomach ache or something?
That was one of the excuses, is the interview went long and he hadn't eaten and it was a long car drive for him.
So, they're just clowns. And that's I was a big supporter of the Green Party till I figured that out, that they're controlled opposition, and there's a real effort to make sure they never reach that 5%. They haven't grown the party in 30 years. And then when she appointed Peter Dow, when she recommended Peter Dow to be when Cornel West was running it as a Green to be his campaign manager, that was proof positive they were controlled opposition. I mean, that guy comes right from the deep state, the Clinton Foundation. And was more proof was that she pretended to not know who he was. Of course. And so that's why she would never come on my show to answer that question, because she just lied about it, right? And so who knows why she said, oh, there was nobody around to run Cornel West's campaign. Well, apparently there was someone else around to run her campaign when she decided to run for president. So there was just one lie after another. It was very disappointing. I support a lot of the what I said about the Green Party is that they're an LGBTQ organization that dabbles in environmentalism. That's what it seems like. So yeah, it's too bad. I salute her stance on Gaza, but everything else is it's a fool's errand to try to get your hopes up about the Green Party.
Are you voting in this election? I mean, I know you're in California, and Harris is going to win.
Doesn't matter. That's the beauty of the Electoral College. It doesn't matter if I vote or if I don't vote in California. And, when I mentioned that we should get rid of the Electoral College, I have a lot of people push back on me, right? So for at least 40% of the country is for the Electoral College. So now they just did a survey. 58% of the country is for getting rid of the Electoral College. And there is no good arguments, right? All the arguments that people make sound good at first, but they're specious. They'll say, well, if we don't have the Electoral College, we're going to be ruled by the coastal elites. First of all, you're ruled by the coastal elites right now, you moron. And you don't think so? What, you think Montana's running things?
Right.
And but my point is that there's millions and millions of Republican votes in New York and voters in New York and California who probably don't even bother to vote because they know their vote doesn't count.
Yeah,
and
same thing with like Democrats in Texas or Ohio.
Democrats in Texas, so same thing. So it would actually increase voter participation if we got rid of the Electoral College. And most presidential elections are decided by a few percentage points. And so that would mean that people would have to. They go, well, if we got rid of the Electoral College, presidential candidates would never. They'd only campaign on the coast. They'd never campaign. They only campaign in a handful of states right now. They don't go to Vermont. They don't go to Wyoming. They don't go to Montana. They don't go to North and South Dakota. They only go to a handful of swing states, and they're only trying to appeal to a handful of undecided independent voters. Those are the people who actually decide the elections. So this idea that it's just all. If we got rid of the Electoral College, everybody's vote would matter. If it's a couple of percentage points that would divide the presidential candidates, they would have to go to Wyoming. They'd have to go to Vermont because those votes
or like Chicago or St. Louis or other places. Because
those votes would actually matter. They'd have to go everywhere because those votes would matter. If a couple of million votes would swing the election, which they often always do, they would have to go everywhere to try to get votes. It would expand their campaigning. It would be the exact opposite. So anyway, but that you're not going to say anything that's going to convince those 39% of the country that likes the Electoral College. They're just 100% wrong about it. And one man, one vote. And, we already have the Senate. So Vermont, a state with less than 1 million people, gets just as much representation in the Senate as California or Texas, which Texas has 29 million people. Vermont doesn't even have 1 million. They get just as much power in the Senate as Texas and California and New York. That doesn't make any sense. That's tilting they're doing that to tilt the table. So anyway, that's I don't know how I got on that, but for my voting, you asked me if I'm voting.
Right.
Yeah. Well, like my friends at Due Dissonance, I'll be writing in Dave Chappelle.
Well, Jimmy, I know we're running out of time. I just want to ask you about a couple things real quick, and that's having Alex Jones on your show. I know you've had him a couple times now, but I'm kind of curious how you got him on the first time, because when you were at TYT, there was a famous viral clip of him coming on the TYT set at the Republican convention, I believe it was,
Right.
and you ended up spitting at Alex Jones during kind of a melee there.
It was
So.
iced tea. It wasn't saliva. Didn't spit a hawker on him. It was iced tea. It was like a
Right.
spit take.
Roger, yeah, run away.
Roger, don't go. He wants to debate you right now.
I'm not going to debate this guy. You're a hatchet man. I don't know why anyone in the media takes you seriously. All you do is lie. You're known as the biggest liar in media. You're the biggest liar in media.
There's nobody watching your show, dude. Don't get too mad. We gotta have a.
All right, well, first of all,
He's actually mad. You're actually really upset.
Hey man, nobody watches you. We know nobody watches you. You need the
Saudi
ratings.
Arabians aren't funny enough. Your little jihad.
hey, first of all, let me explain something, all right? Okay, this is bullshit. Okay, hold on. We're against Saudi Arabia, you dumbass. We talk about that all the time.
Oh, really?
We talk about that all the time.
Get off the
You don't know
line,
shit. What do you think, the lizard people are in charge? Is that what you think?
Hey, you're pissed. We're kicking
Bilderbergs?
your ass.
Is that what you
You're
think?
the anti-liberal and you're pissed.
Bullshit.
We're being nice here.
You know what I care about the American people.
Good. You're the one flipping out. Anybody hurt? I'm being nice. I'm not calling.
Everybody get the fuck off my stage! Get the fuck off my stage!
What the fuck?
I would imagine, after that, there must have been some level of, if not animosity, but maybe awkwardness between you guys. Like, how did you end up eventually having him on your show?
So what happened was there was a coordinated effort to silence. There was a conspiracy to silence Alex Jones in the social media, and they did it. And I got into shouting matches and many debates at the Young Turks when I still worked there on camera, defending Alex Jones and talking about how we have to, if you don't stand up for Alex Jones, they're coming for us next. Well, they're not coming for the Young Turks because the Young Turks are establishment pablum, right? They're owned by Jeffrey Katzenberg, right? The biggest Democratic Party donor and the biggest insider, right? So they have a corporate board with people from private equity firms on there. I mean, so the Young Turks are not anything what they appear to be. So of course they're never gonna. They tell the lies about Ukraine war. They told the lies about the Syrian war. They told the lie. They repeated the FBI and CIA talking points about Russiagate and Ukraine and COVID and the vaccines and lot. There's nothing. They don't ever go against the establishment. There's no point to them. Right? Just like Breaking Points and Kyle Kalinske, there's no point to them anymore. We already have MSNBC and CNN. So, of course, they were for censoring Alex Jones because they knew they would never be censored because they're never going to say anything that actually challenges the establishment, right? Well, I knew I was going to be because I was currently doing it. I was currently debunking Russiagate. I was currently debunking the Syrian war. I knew that I was... And so I stood up for Alex Jones's right to free speech. People are saying, why are you defending Alex Jones? I'm not defending Alex Jones. I'm defending the First Amendment and free speech. And if Alex Jones is breaking a law, there are already law enforcement agencies in place. There are attorney generals, there are sheriffs, there are district attorneys, there are police of all sorts that are going to be there if he breaks a law and breaks the First Amendment. I don't need a Silicon Valley billionaire in the dead of night without any transparency deciding who gets free speech and who doesn't. So that's why I stood up for him. I stood up, and I think Alex Jones and his people saw that. They saw that I had a principled stance, and I didn't go along with the slander of him. And so I think that's and according to him, his wife is a fan of my show. So I think that's what kind of softened up the relationship. And I realized that Alex Jones, while he has a bombastic style, he gets way more things right than the establishment news, way more things right than people like the Young Turks or Kyle Kalinske or Crystal Ball, that's for fucking sure. They've been wrong about everything. They've been 100% wrong about COVID. They were 100% wrong about Ukraine war. They're 100% wrong about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They're now endorsing genociders. It's unbelievable. They're all, and they're giddy about it. So yeah, so when I saw that, and I realized that, again, I'll join with anyone to do right and no one to do wrong. And there's a lot of points of agreement. So I was just like with Tucker Carlson. There's lots of points of agreement. There's points of disagreement also. But I'm not discarding people because we don't agree on everything. The foundation of organizing is to join with people you vehemently disagree with on other topics around a topic you agree on. That's what gives it its power.
Are there people though who you wouldn't platform or wouldn't interview?
I mean, it would, every situation I would have to take on its face. I mean, I would interview Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the biggest murderer in the world. Right? So if I would interview him, who wouldn't I? Right?
Well,
And
so one reason
can,
I ask is Jake Shields recently had Nick Fuentes on his show, and Jake Shields asked Nick Fuentes if he would talk to you, and he said sure he would. But obviously he's a very controversial figure. So like him, for example, is that somebody who you would interview, or is that just kind of too far?
You know what? I honestly don't know, and I don't know. I know very little about Nick Fuentes. I see tweets by him, and that's about it. So I don't know anything about him. But in a case like if I interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu, I would spend my whole time talking about his brazen psychopathic warmongering and genocidal slaughter. So if I would bring on someone like that, I don't know how productive it would be. We'd just be sitting there arguing about oh, did you say the racist things or not? I mean, I don't know anything about him. And I'm not feigning ignorance. There's a lot of people I don't know a lot about. And he's one of them. So, but no, I mean, if you're willing to interview Benjamin Netanyahu, there should be nobody off limits. I mean, if you're willing to, the guy's literally slaughtering children, slaughtering them, right? Alex Jones didn't kill anybody. This guy's and he's welcome in the halls of Congress. He's welcome on every television station. He's welcome on any talk show. So if you're willing to, same thing with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, they're right now funding a genocide. If you're willing to interview those people, nobody should be off the table.
Well,
Right?
Jim,
What do you think?
Well, I think the tricky thing is, especially for the anti-imperialist left or populists, it's there's always this constant accusation of horseshoe theory and red-brown alliance, right? So like if you have Alex Jones or Matt Walsh or Candace Owens or these kind of people on, you're going to get accused of that and trying to unite the far left with the far right. But what I find interesting is you never have that accusation for when more mainstream people do that, like when TYT and Ben Shapiro get together, or when Dick Cheney endorses Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris accepts that, right? Like that's completely unhinged in my perspective. Why is there not more outrage about that?
Did Cheney have endorsed you? What do you think? I'm honored to have their endorsement, and I think that what they both, as leaders who are well respected, are making an important statement that it's okay, and if not important, to put country above party. And I'm honored to have their support, and I think it's an important statement right now. A lot of what I think is happening, and I was just talking with some folks here in Pittsburgh about it, is that people are exhausted about the division and the attempts to kind of divide us as Americans. And them stepping up to make this public statement, I think, is courageous, but also for people like the folks I was just talking with, it really reinforces for them that we love our country and we have more in common than what separates us. So. And I also want to thank your father, Vice President Dick Cheney, for his support and what he has done to serve our country. Every endorsement matters, and this endorsement matters a great deal, Liz, and it carries a special significance.
And Bernie Sanders even defending that, like, yeah, we all believe in democracy.
Well, Kristen, what I think Dick and Liz Cheney are saying is that in this existential moment in American history, it's not just issues. Cheney and I agree on nothing, no issues. But what we do believe in is that the United States should retain its democratic foundations. And it's not just Cheney. I think there is a significant number of Republicans who say, well, you know, I may not agree with the vice president on this issue or that issue, but I cannot support somebody who's a pathological liar, somebody who fomented a insurrection to overthrow the election return. So I applaud the Cheneys for their courage in defending democracy. Obviously, on all the issues, we have very different points of view.
Like, they successfully stole the 2000 election. How can you say that, you know, he believes in democracy, not to mention all the torture and wars and everything else? So, you know, that's kind of sign of the unique thing for people who are not spouting establishment propaganda, is that if you talk to somebody on the other side, then you're somehow secretly a Nazi or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, the establishment control, is that they try to police who you're allowed to talk to. And I'll talk to anybody I fucking feel like it. And nobody will ever try to confront me on my policies from the left, because they all are from the left, right? I'm still anti-war, and that includes Gaza and Israel and Lebanon and Iran. I'm still for Medicare for all. I'm still pro LGBTQ. How I'm still pro-union, I'm pro-worker. So yeah, I think so. That's all they have, is it's because I'm actually anti-establishment, and people who say horseshoe theory are the establishment. Look what they are. They're the people who support Kamala Harris. They're the people who support the warmongering war parties. They're the people who supported the COVID narrative. They're the people who supported the Ukraine war. They're the people who repeated Russiagate talking points. Of course, those people are going to say horseshoe theory, because we're the ones telling the truth. That's all they have. That's
right.
All they have is slander.
Well, again, what really pisses me off is that I was somebody who was marching in the streets 20 years ago against Bush and Cheney, right? And I thought the Democrats, especially in like the 2006, 2008 elections, I thought that they were standing up for free speech and wanted diplomacy and were against McCarthyism and like all this stuff, right? And not only has the Democratic Party embraced neoconservatism largely, they're literally palling around and accepting the nominations of George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Like, that's just insane. And, you know, 20 years from now, are they going to be, well, Donald Trump probably won't be, you know, around in 20 years, but you know what I mean? Like, is he going to just be, you know, vindicated at some point by them because it's just political opportunism?
They've already, I mean, the Democratic Party is fully morphed into the party of Dick Cheney and George Bush, except they put a rainbow flag on it. That's the only difference. That's it. They're against giving me health care. Joe Biden bragged that he would veto Medicare for all. They're for every war everywhere. They're the biggest neocons ever. And when you find people like you know, Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, Crystal Ball, Kyle Kalinske supporting those people, they're just establishment mouthpiece hacks. That's what they are. And of course they have to, you know, they talk about the Bernie to Trump pipeline, which I don't support Trump, right? I never told anybody to vote for him. I'm not voting for him. I never voted for him, but they're voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are pro-censorship, pro-genocide, pro-Ukraine war, pro-Wall Street, anti-worker. They crushed the worker, the railroad union strike. It's like they became everything that they're supposed to be against. They went from Bernie Sanders to being neocons. That's what they are, and they pretend they're not, but that's exactly what they are. And it should outrage you. It should outrage you. And that's why I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. I didn't leave the left. I am the left. The left, the people who think they're left are actually right-wing neocons. I don't even like to call them right-wing, because the right-wingers don't believe in the garbage they believe in. Most of the right-wingers I know are against most of the wars. And they're for free speech. They're not for censorship. So that's a big deal. If you're for censorship, you're a fascist. And that's neocon 101. And I don't even like calling it right wing because most of the right wingers I know are against censorship.
Right. And again, I think Bush and Cheney are, that's the administration that pushed the United States closer to fascism than probably anyone else. But, now somehow they're vindicated. Jimmy, I know we're, like 5 minutes over. Do you have any time for a few patron questions?
I have let me see, what time is it?
It's fine if you can't.
I got 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll ask you one quick patron question. A pothead comedian doing better work than the mainstream media was a fantastic running gag I miss. Jimmy talked about his dreams since he quit smoking weed, but has he noticed an increase in nightmares? One reason is it's recommended for PTSD patients and reduces or eliminates REM sleep, meaning fewer dreams and nightmares.
No, I haven't. I haven't had a nightmare since I quit smoking pot. I've had a few anxiety dreams, but I wouldn't say no. I've actually become more in touch with my unconscious, my transpersonal self, and God. I've come closer to God and than I've ever been in my life, and I realized that my ego consciousness is not in control. That there is a greater consciousness I call God that is in control. It's the same God that creates my dream life as the same God that creates my waking life. And all I can do is try to surf that wave of consciousness that's out of my control, out of my power, and I surrender to it. And Carl Jung talks about that complete surrender. And every encounter with God is or he calls it the self with a capital S, which means your entirety of your psyche. Every encounter with the self is a defeat for the ego. And so I will welcome those defeats for my ego because it helps me wake up to who I truly am.
Well, Jimmy, again, I really appreciate you being on the show today and going over. Folks, we probably don't have to plug your show. Probably everybody knows, but for folks out there who'd like to follow you and support you or maybe see you in person, how can they do that?
JimmyDore.com. I'm going to be in Ohio and Kentucky in November. I'm going to be in Tempe, Arizona. I think that's almost sold out with a special guest. That's a special surprise guest, October 20th. And then I'll be doing this Rumble Time show, November 1st and 8th here at the Kodak Theater at the XR Studios in Los Angeles. So for all those events, we're going to have big celebrity guests. We're going to have people like Roseanne, and we're going to have people like Dr. Drew and Rob Schneider. All kinds of people are going to be on that Rumble Time show. So go to JimmyDore.com for a link for tickets. We're also doing stand-up comedy in Burbank and the day after Thanksgiving. Doing a big stand-up show, Jimmy Dore and Friends. If you're in the Los Angeles area, Burbank, California, also go to JimmyDore.com, get a link for those shows. They're always fun events. See you then.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jimmy. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully I can have you back on for a record-setting 8th appearance sometime soon.
Smash that Matt Taibbi.